Hello, everybody. My name is Etael, and I'm here with Mr. George Sandeman today, and he'll be talking to us about his trajectory in life and the Porter's wine and everything about that, so that we can be informed and learn a little bit about everything that involves his business and his history. So, Mr. George Sandeman, thank you for being here. My name is Etael. So, for the first question, we just want to ask a little bit about you so you can tell us who you are and what you do and what's the story behind everything that we're talking about here today.
Okay,
Okay.
so I grew up in the wine business,
Okay.
which for me was both port in the north of Portugal and sherry in the south of Spain.
Okay.
My mother was from the south of Spain, so it gave me the advantage of being half English and half Spanish, linked to two wonderful wines. And I, I really spent my entire life working in various aspects of the wine business.
Okay.
And there are a lot of, we tend to think of a wine business as something that's very romantic and we
Yeah.
drink wine, we have a nice time.
Yes.
Behind that, of course, there is a whole business
Yeah.
which needs to be evolved. And I've been very fortunate to work through most of the elements of that business. So I started out in production area, and although I never made wine, I did participate in the blending
Okay.
of particularly port, and then went into areas like marketing and sales, and then eventually into management and the more political side
Okay. Okay.
of keeping the business alive in a regulatory environment, in a government environment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. I see.
In the last 4 years, I started my own company, small
Okay.
consulting company,
Oh, it's welcome.
which I called Ex Ampulla,
Oh, okay.
which is a bit of a joke.
Ex Ampola, is that
Yes,
it?
Ex Ampulla,
Oh,
and that means out of the bottle
Ah, out of the vault.
in Latin.
Oh,
And I
makes
thought
sense.
this would
Okay.
be an amusing name to
Yes, it
have.
is. Yeah.
And so now I work with people to help them in projects and use the experience that I have
Okay. So,
in different projects.
oh, that's nice. So that's either your role in the company right now, even in Porter's Wine. That's what you do. You're kind of the head of the company to make them.
I'm the head of I'm the head of my company,
Yeah. Okay.
which is a tiny company.
Okay. Okay. Please.
There are there are two full-time people and probably three. Um, we work in network.
No, yeah. Okay.
Three people. We have a number of clients who we work with. So I'm out of the active business. But before I was out of the active business, I worked in what is called public affairs,
Public affairs. That makes sense.
having already done public relations and marketing and sales.
Okay. Okay. That is.
So I went through, and business, of course, because I was general manager of Sandeman for 8 years
Ah.
as part of my time with Seagram.
Oh, that's very nice. I am a student of marketing, so I am very passionate about marketing and sales and business. So I find that is very interesting because right now the Porter's wine is expanding to new markets, right? So that's the main thing about it. So that background, I'm sure it helps to go into this markets, right? So tell us about a little about that, this
Yeah,
expansion.
I will. The port business is within the wine sector is a very mature business.
Okay.
So by mature, I mean that if you look at what port was doing maybe 25, 30 years ago, it was a much more dynamic sector. Today, it's becoming more concentrated and very much divided in between a very top-end luxury product,
Top end luxury.
which is available to people who have the income,
Have the income.
so are going to spend the income, and on a more mass basis, are quite accessible. And accessible, as you know, you'll know in marketing,
Yes, yes.
means that it's cheap.
Yes, yeah, makes sense.
It's a polite way of saying it's
Yeah.
cheap, and sometimes this is a conflict because if you have consumers looking at a low price product
Yes.
and then you offer them a high price product, they go,
Yo,
what's
I don't
happening? We don't understand this.
Yes.
So port has this challenge. It's a very big challenge, and of course behind all of that, there is a whole question of the production, the people that grow it, vineyards, the Douro region, which is a region that really can't grow anything else if it isn't vines. And so it's a complex mix. So yes, port is looking for a new way out. I think that is the great challenge. I mean, there are several things that have been tried,
Yes.
but it is looking for. I mean, whether it's new markets, new consumers, new ways to consume, a new trend,
On your time.
because it could become a new trend. There could be a new trend there.
Yes.
It's not an easy not an easy question.
Yeah, it's not, I guess so.
You told me there would only be easy questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an easy question. I can see that because it involves a lot of studies, right? Studying different countries and markets and understanding very well the consumers in it to really put money and investment into it, right? To put
Yes, that is very true, and it's the strangest market sometimes that suddenly start to develop. There's a lot of competition,
yeah.
and you can't think of, in the past we always thought of port. The competition for port was maybe sherry, which is made in the south of Spain, or Madeira, which is made in the Madeira Islands. But now the competition is wine, it's hard seltzers, it's water,
It's
it's
everything, right?
everything, juice, all of these things. And these are all options that consumers have.
Yes.
And so how do you say to a consumer, but port actually is quite nice, and it tastes good and it gives you a relaxing, feeling, and you can feel civilized drinking a glass of port in a relaxing way.
Yes.
And strangely enough, new markets, South Korea suddenly became an interesting port market, something that you would never expect.
Yeah, that's surprising. Right?
Because you think all the traditional wine markets, I mean, North America, because of the wine knowledge,
Yes.
but suddenly another market pops open, and suddenly you have a group of people becoming very interested. And as you know today, with social media and communication,
Yes.
it's very instant.
Yes.
Smaller groups, but small groups of influencers can then have a lot of influence in larger groups of influencers.
Okay.
So
So that's a nice strategy. So do you feel like that's a strategy that you would adopt to connect with influencers and public speakers and people who have influence in those areas to expand the
I think
the brand?
it's a viable strategy, but there's always a but.
Yes, yeah, there's always a but. Yes.
Because communication obviously brings awareness,
Yes.
and if you do it enough, it'll bring a repeated amount of awareness that will actually give people the incentive to go buy something.
Yes.
Then it's your second problem. How do you get your product there?
Yeah.
Okay,
Distribution.
so distribution is a big issue, a big problem, and nowadays, I mean, there was a moment, I think about 5 years ago, when everybody said, "Oh, it's fantastic, the internet and influencers and purchasing online, and it's great because everybody can sell online." And then suddenly, Amazon comes along and takes up a great big chunk
Yeah.
of
Yes.
the online business. And so all the small people are going like, you know, at one point they were going to, I don't know, Continente,
Yeah.
say, let me in, let me in.
Yeah.
Now they're going to Amazon. It's like, let me in, let me in. So it's a real problem.
Yeah, it is
You
a
know,
real problem.
how do you do it? And, you know, I haven't got an, I mean, I haven't got an answer for that. I mean,
Yeah.
communities, creating communities is obviously very important.
Exactly.
I mean, we see that on a lot of things. I mean, luxury goods, perfumes, clothing, you know, people wearing the same type of shoes,
Yes.
which are, you know, become a community of
I
people
think, yeah,
who do it. So port can fall into that, maybe, and that would be a strategy.
there will be a strategy, and it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because you were telling us about how port wines makes you feel. Like, it is a very, it makes you feel in a civilized and chic environment and feeling good about yourself. Is that how the brand, you know, how the strategy and the points that you make to make the comparison between port wine and other beverages and food, like
I think it is, but as I started out when I said that the problem is that it's a mature category. So
yes, it
the
is.
the category split in between the top expensive end,
Yes.
you know, and what you see in the supermarket for five euros. So I mean, you know, on the top shelf, you're seeing something that's like 25, 30, 40, 50, or even 100 euros. And on the bottom shelf, you're seeing something that's 4 or 5 euros. And these are two completely different consumers. You don't have the €5 consumer saying, it's Saturday, I think I'll buy €100 bottle of port.
Yeah.
It doesn't work
It-
like
it
that.
doesn't work like that,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's managing that the category or the brand, and I think your use of the word brand there was very
Yes.
important.
Yes.
It's managing the brand to say, you know, yes, that cheap end of it
That cheap
is
end
sort of important
is so important.
because it still keeps the vineyards going, but sort of ignore it and go to the other end,
the other
and that is very difficult.
It's very difficult.
I think one of the things, you know, the difference in between today's communication and social media is that you can target. I mean, when you had national television, you know,
Yes.
and you had two channels, everybody would switch on, and you'd reach, you know, 5 million people.
million people,
It was
yeah.
like 5 million people. That's amazing.
Yes, right.
You know, probably only 100,000 were interested. So 4,900,000
Yes.
didn't care.
Didn't care,
you know.
exactly.
So nowadays you can really go down to it, and I mean, in a terrifying manner, you know, go down to a target. I mean,
Yes.
you know, like I know that if I want to target you personally,
it's very
I can do it.
Yes.
You know, I just have to pay enough money for you to get my information and my ad. That's probably too expensive for most
Must be.
port brands, because I mean, you can do it if you're, you know, if you're, I don't know, Procter and Gamble, or you're you know, some really large, you know, company, and I've tracked you, and I know what you buy in the supermarket, and all of that information. But for the average port brand, it's difficult. So you sort of build communities, probably around wine people,
Yeah.
influencers who are also tasters, wine writers, some consumers who are very interested, and there you can develop something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually, and because it's a very complex matter, right? And I feel like this is a right mindset and a very great way of looking at it. But because I think it could really make an impact on those markets if you have the right strategy, right? Yeah.
I think so. And if I can add one thing there, because one of the things, and you mentioned this, and I mentioned before, I mean, there is an element of what kind of experience you get from drinking something.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so So it's if it's a you're on it's a sunny day. I don't know, you've been playing some sport or
Yes.
something like this, and the experience you get either from drinking a water or drinking a beer is refreshing.
It is refreshing.
You know,
Yes.
it's a nice afternoon or a cold evening, sort of like the weather we're having now, and a glass of port with your friends, sitting around, just talking and enjoying is another experience. And it can be
Yeah.
also a very enjoyable experience.
It
So I think a
can.
lot of it comes down to the experience that
That
one gets.
the one gets exactly.
And that in marketing is very important.
It's very important.
To be able to sell the illusion, the expectation, the anticipation
And
of
the
that
anticipation of the experience.
Yeah, that's
I mean that's very important, and I agree with it. So I think we're gonna make a quick break just
Okay.
for 5 minutes, and then we're gonna get back and talk about a little bit how people that are getting into business and getting into these markets, and if you have some advice for them and that kind of stuff. So
okay.
okay,
Excellent.
just
Super.
a break.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're back, and we'll keep talking about Mr. George Sandman's trajectory, and we've been very blessed here with a lot of wisdom. Thank you for being here. And right now, I have a question about the port wine and young people, right? Because we talk about this, the market and how it can be very important for this top class, I can say like that, to consume the wine. And we talked about that the wine is also in very diverse markets in very, I mean, low prices as well. And that I think most people, most young people would be in that category, right? And people who don't consume actually the top tier of the brand, right? The but how would you say that applies to port wine, for example?
I think in general you're right. I mean, I believe that there are exceptions
Okay.
to every rule.
Yes, yes,
But there's
yes,
an
of course.
exception, obviously. I mean, there are some young people who would rather say, well, I'll buy a really good bottle of port and share it with a group of friends rather than buy 3 bottles of average port. But I think, when you look at the way people tend to drink port, older people tend to drink it on its own in a glass, slightly more conservative in the way it is. Whereas you find that younger people who have a more open-minded view to this will use port in cocktails.
Okay.
And this is not a new thing. It's curious. If you go to a book, Bartender's Guide to Cocktails, written in 1883 or 1863, I forget my dates, you'll find that the classic cocktails contained port.
Oh,
So you can make something as simple as a sangria
okay.
from
From
port,
port.
just taking a bottle of port and adding some ice and slices of orange, and some 7 Up or sparkling water, and you can make a sangria, as simply as that. Or you can put it on ice, or you can get into more complicated cocktails like what's the name of the cocktail with Campari in it? I can't remember. A Negroni. A Negroni.
Negroni.
Yeah, so you can get sophisticated like that if you want, or you can be quite simple about it. I think the main issue is that people have the concept, and younger people have the concept that port is heavy and sweet and boring and their grandparents drank it. And so why would I drink it? I drink something else. But they've done a lot of work on things like port tonic, which white port and tonic, even to the point of having it in cans to attract people. and that has created some attraction to it. I have to say, it hasn't created as much attraction as people thought it would,
Okay.
because it goes back to the whole point of awareness.
Of awareness.
You
Exactly.
know, until you can create awareness
Awareness.
and then some kind of brand image that people will actually go out and buy it.
Yes.
It's a problem, and then you need the distribution.
Yeah,
Did we talk about that?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
talked
we talked
about
about
that. It's very challenging as well. Yeah, so that's very nice that the port is very diverse and you can consume it in various ways. Yes, and even in young people, we can see ways, as you said here, that people can actually consume instead of, for example, just consuming the wine. For example, there are very different ways of consuming, right? So, in regarding as well, again to young people, what's your advice, for example, for some young people who are interested in starting a business wine or are interested in getting into that industry, for example? Well, I mean, it's a very
I mean,
complex, right? But,
I know that, I mean, you know, the job market is generally very difficult. And I think, you know, I know a lot of young people who've gone looking for jobs in other countries. I think if you're going to go into the wine business, Portugal is probably one of the best countries to go into because there's an enormous diversity. But in this, I think you need to be, a young person needs to be very prepared to go through what I always called, and what I learned was called the learning versus earning
okay.
curve.
Okay.
And, you know, as you get experience, you tend to earn very little.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And once you have more experience, then you can cash in your learning.
Okay.
But coming away from an academic environment
Okay.
gives you many tools to go into the learning stage.
To the learning stage, just to get into.
Into
Yeah,
it.
okay. Okay.
I mean, a silly story, but true. I remember I left school. I didn't do university, and before starting my apprenticeship in the wine business, I decided that I would work independently and get a job. So I got a job in a place that was related with wine, and ended up cleaning these underground tanks, stainless steel tanks with a bit of wire wool, and hanging onto a ladder and cleaning. And at the time I thought to myself, this is, you know, really a stupid thing for me to be doing because I'm not getting paid very much, and I really don't like it, the job. But as I went through the rest of life, I always thought back and said, you know, at the beginning of life, you should be doing the worst job. Because if you get through halfway through your life and you find you're doing the worst job then you have a big problem.
That's a big problem.
So when it was going back to your question, because there is a thing here. If you're a young person looking to get into the wine business, or basically into any business, I think one has to be prepared to be doing a lot of learning work rather than earning work. And this is very frustrating because your cost of living is high. You have to pay for apartments. You want to go. I mean, you want to have a life, so you want to go out now and then. You know, you like to eat, so it's a nice thing to do. So it's a difficult balance, but the more learning you have, the more you can you can translate that into earning.
Yes,
Okay, I mean this is very important, and within that, I say this in an environment, and I follow this very closely. There is a problem with labour at the moment. in terms of finding jobs.
Yes.
But there's an increasingly large problem with finding good employees.
Mm, exactly.
Okay,
I agree.
so there are a lot of people who go into a job. I mean, I recently somebody who I like and is the same age as my daughter and is a nice chap, but he's a little
Okay.
out there.
Uh-huh.
Said he didn't like his job, so he just stopped.
You just thought,
He just stopped working. He didn't like it,
whoa.
and you go, wow. Well, what are you going to do now? And he said, I don't know. I'll work it out. Because I wasn't going to live my life like that. And the reality is that sometimes you have to do that work
Yes.
to be able to get into the next stage.
Yes. It is.
And then the last piece of advice I give is if you take on a job, do it for at least 12 months. Okay? And this has to do with your curriculum. Because when you send me your curriculum and I look at it, the first thing I do is look and see how many months or years you were in each position. And if you're in a position for less than 12 months
Yes.
in 2 or 3 places,
Yes.
I won't hire you.
Ah, yeah, that's a red flag.
It's a red flag. So this is
Okay.
really important. I think that's a really important thing. I tell my daughters this all the time. They say, I hate my job. I'm going to, how long have you been there? 8 months. Hold out another 4 months. And, I think it's, you build a curriculum as a young person. You build a curriculum so that you impress people as you go along.
Yes.
And it needs to be solid.
Yes.
I don't know if you know, I mean, and I don't want to get off, but you can cut this out,
No,
but
it's okay.
I was recently in a hiring process, not for me, we were hiring somebody else, and I was talking to one of the big companies, who had a delegate in this hiring process, and I was asking them about their hiring. I can tell you who it was for. It was for Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, and I was talking to them, and they said they have artificial intelligence that takes out approximately 80% of the curriculums that they are sent.
Wow.
Okay,
That's a
so
lot.
only
80%.
20% of the curriculums that they receive will get a human being looking at it, of which then probably 10%, 5%, 8% actually then get somebody seriously looking, and then you get an interview.
Wow.
So I mean, it is
That's
so it means that when you build something like a curriculum, it really needs to stand out. It's not good enough to be the top.
Yeah, it's not.
It means that you got to be the top of everybody else that's around you. It's a dog eat dog world.
Yeah, it is. And it's very hard. I mean, looking at your story and how you started and you were building up your career and your curriculum, let's say.
Okay.
So-
I had a very big advantage. I had a thing which is called nepotism.
Oh, okay.
I had a thing which was called nepotism, but to be fair, I the family that I grew up in was very demanding.
Very demanding.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't like, you're in.
You're in
because,
just
no,
because,
I
okay.
mean, it was like you have the first chance, but you got to do it.
You're
And then later on, it was a publicly quoted, so we were on the stock exchange, public company.
okay.
And then it was bought by an American multinational. And I worked for an American multinational, and their nepotism didn't count it.
Okay, then cut in wages, performance.
But the first door was
I mean, but yes,
was-
but you had to build experience and you had to be good, right? So that's the point for many young people. You actually, I like that you said a year. a year on a job, because this shows resilience, this shows discipline, this shows that can keep actually growing at something, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
in your story, I see that too, because even though it started like that, that was the first door, but you're here until now. So that actually shows that you are building up, that you build experience and skills to it. So I find that very, very, very impressive, and it's very nice to hear that.
Thank you.
So,
But it does
so right
help.
now,
It does help. I have to
yeah,
say,
a bit.
it helps. But then at
Uh-huh.
the end of the day, it's what you do that counts,
Mhm.
and that's where you've got to be have the resilience, as you
Yes.
say, to do it and stick with it, even if you hate it.
Yeah, even if you hate
Yeah, I
it.
mean, and then and this doesn't. By the way, I have to say, being a year in a place doesn't necessarily mean you don't
Yeah.
start looking for a job 8 months when you
Right,
reach eight
yeah, yeah.
months,
Uh-huh.
because that's a piece of advice that never ever look for a job
Uh-huh.
unemployed.
Unemployed. Okay.
If you're going to look for a job because you hate your job, be employed when you're looking for your job. Always.
Oh,
Because if you're, even when on your curriculum it says, left company, unless you have the very, very, very bad luck of the company imploding or folding,
folding,
or if you're working for an agency, the agency disappears or something like this, that's very bad luck. But people take that into consideration. But if you leave a company and then start looking for a job,
yeah.
it's not good.
It's not good, right?
Not good. It's much better to always work for a. There's a lot of online advice, by the way, about how to look for jobs and things to say in interviews. It's worth. It's worth. I mean,
Okay, it's worth. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm going to look
Yeah,
into it as
yeah,
well.
it's worth it.
It's very nice. So, I think that's it then.
Okay,
It
cool.
was very nice to speak to you, and I think we learned a lot from you and from your experience. And I think our audience would be very delighted to to hear all that we collected here. So
Okay.
thank you for being here, Mr. George Sandman, and
Pleasure.
it was a pleasure.
Thank you. And all I say, if I can just say one last word,
Yes, yes.
when you drink wine, always drink in moderation.
Oh,
Okay,
that's very important.
because it's a civilized thing to do, and if you don't do it in moderation, you become uncivilized, and
That
that's
makes
not
sense.
good.
Yeah, that's not good. Okay,
All
thank you.
right, thank you, thank you, thank you. Well done, well done.